You know, when you hear people talking about Bitcoin, it's usually something like, what is it? Some kind of digital currency
Yeah.
for techies or something out of like a cyberpunk novel.
Right.
But what if I told you it's actually becoming a major player in American politics
Yeah.
and maybe even holds the key to a sustainable energy future?
Wow.
We're taking a deep dive into Bitcoin mining today.
Okay.
And trust me, it's a lot more interesting than what you might think.
I'm intrigued.
We're diving into this panel discussion we saw with some of the biggest names in Bitcoin mining. We got Marathon in there,
Okay.
Riot, Clean Spark.
Wow, the big players.
Oh, yeah, they really spilled the tea on how all this stuff works. Politics, energy,
Well,
and
yeah.
even AI are all intertwined in shaping the future of this technology.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. You start to see how technology blurs the lines between what you do online and the real world.
It's crazy. Okay, so first, let's talk about the politics of it all.
Okay.
The panel talked a lot about, this growing political support for Bitcoin, especially from the Republican Party.
Right.
They even mentioned Donald Trump and how he said Bitcoin was very interesting.
Yeah, and what's interesting is how that political support that they're talking about could actually turn into real policy changes.
Oh, wow.
The people on the panel, especially the Marathon and Riot guys, seem to think that the U.S. could become like
A safe haven.
a haven for Bitcoin mining if the right policies are put in place.
And it's not even about, appealing to tech companies anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
like a whole voting block.
Exactly. I think it was something like over 52 million Americans have owned Bitcoin at some point.
Wow, so they have to appeal to those voters.
It's a big chunk of voters.
So it seems politicians are starting to see how much potential there is in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Not just from, an economic standpoint, but an electoral standpoint, too.
It makes sense.
But let's talk about,
The elephant in the room.
yeah, the elephant in the room, the energy consumption.
Right.
Bitcoin mining uses a crazy amount of energy.
It's a lot.
And it gets a lot of criticism, people saying it's bad for the environment and all that.
Oh, God.
But these experts actually had a different perspective. They said that it could be an opportunity instead of a problem.
Really? That's interesting.
Right.
How's it an opportunity?
So they were saying that Bitcoin mining could actually help produce more energy. Okay.
Like renewable energy specifically.
Interesting.
Because to attract miners, you need to have cheap energy.
Okay.
So this incentivizes investment in new energy sources like renewables,
Right.
which could help us transition to a better energy grid, a more sustainable energy grid.
I see. So it's kind of like that whole internet boom where everybody was suddenly using the internet and needed data.
Exactly.
And that led to investments in broadband infrastructure. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like could Bitcoin mining lead to more investments in renewable energy?
Interesting.
That's what they're saying.
It's a feedback loop. Bitcoin mining needs the energy, so it pushes for more energy to be made.
Right.
And if that energy is renewable, then it could really help the environment.
Exactly. So I can definitely see how that would appeal to both sides,
Everyone wants more energy, and everyone wants cleaner energy.
For sure.
But then there's this whole AI thing that I was not expecting.
Yeah, where does that come into play?
Like, what is the link between Bitcoin mining and AI?
So they're both, energy intensive,
Yeah.
but they can actually work together well.
Really?
Yeah. So imagine Bitcoin mining is like a giant flexible battery.
Okay.
And AI, takes a ton of energy to run.
Right.
But it could be flexible with how it uses that energy, when it needs it, all that. They can work together instead of competing for energy.
So it's more like they can make the whole grid more efficient.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So imagine AI is managing the power grid.
Okay.
And when there's just extra energy, like off-peak hours,
Yeah.
you can use that energy for Bitcoin mining. And when the AI needs more energy, you just scale back the Bitcoin mining and it frees up all that energy.
Wow. So it's like a perfectly balanced system.
Exactly. They work together.
So it's like Bitcoin miners are these energy first responders ready to jump in and balance the grid whenever AI needs a power boost. That's seriously cool. But I have to ask, if the US becomes this Bitcoin mining powerhouse, what happens to the idea of decentralization? Isn't that supposed to be one of the core principles of Bitcoin?
That's a great question, and the panelists definitely wrestled with that tension. Bitcoin was designed to be decentralized, operating outside the control of any single entity or government. But as the U.S. leans into Bitcoin mining, there's an inherent tension with that idea.
So how do they reconcile that? I mean, how can the US be a leader in Bitcoin mining while still respecting its decentralized nature?
It's a tightrope walk for sure. Some of the companies represented on the panel, like Riot and CleanSpark, talk about their strategies for expanding mining operations across different states and even internationally. They're trying to diversify geographically as a way to prevent too much centralization in any one location.
So it's like a balancing act, trying to benefit from the economic potential of Bitcoin mining without undermining its decentralized ethos. But it sounds like a lot is riding on how the U.S. decides to regulate this industry, and with the elections coming up, things could get interesting.
Absolutely. The panel described the upcoming elections as a potential turning point for Bitcoin mining in the U.S. A Republican administration, especially if Trump is elected, could create a very favorable regulatory environment for the industry to thrive.
But on the other hand,
On the other hand, a Democratic administration might be more inclined towards stricter regulations, especially regarding energy consumption and environmental impact. The panel highlighted energy policy and banking regulations as the two key areas to watch closely.
so there are a lot of potential roadblocks ahead, but it sounds like there's also a lot of optimism within the industry. But let's bring this back down to earth for a second. What does this all mean for the average person? Should I be buying Bitcoin, investing in these mining companies?
Well, we're not financial advisors here, so we can't give investment advice. But I think the more interesting question is how this all ties into the bigger picture of technological advancement and its impact on our lives.
What do you mean?
Think about it. Bitcoin mining, while complex, is forcing us to confront some fundamental questions about our energy future. We talked about its energy intensity, but it's also driving innovation and investment in renewable energy sources. It's pushing us to find cleaner, more efficient ways to power our world.
And with AI also demanding more and more energy, it seems like finding sustainable solutions is more important than ever. But what about the environmental concerns we hear about with Bitcoin mining, like electronic waste? All those computers running 24/7 must generate a lot of e-waste.
You're right, that's a valid concern. The panel briefly touched on this, mentioning that the industry is becoming more aware of its environmental footprint and that there are efforts to recycle and dispose of mining equipment responsibly. Some companies are even experimenting with using renewable energy sources to power their mining operations, further reducing their environmental impact.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Potential environmental benefits coupled with valid concerns about e-waste and resource consumption.
Exactly. It highlights the complexity of these issues and the need for ongoing dialogue and innovation to find truly sustainable solutions. The technology is still relatively new, and we're all figuring things out as we go.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to think about.
It really is.
Like, on one hand, you have this potential for cleaner energy
Right.
and like a financial system that isn't controlled by anyone, but then you have to worry about the environment
Of course, that's always a concern.
and these big companies getting too much power.
It's tough. It's like technology changes faster than we can understand it.
It really does.
It's uncharted territory. We're just figuring it out as we go.
And speaking of uncharted territory, did we ever talk about quantum computing and how that affects all this?
That's a whole other thing, right?
Because I heard it could either like change the game completely
Right.
or totally destroy Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because these quantum computers, with all that power,
They're ridiculously powerful.
yeah, they might actually be able to crack the codes that protect Bitcoin.
Oh, wow. So someone could hack it?
Potentially, yeah.
But then again, I guess it could make it even more secure.
It could. Quantum computing could lead to ways to mine Bitcoin that are more secure and use less energy.
No, my head is spinning.
It's a lot to take in.
I guess we'll have to save that for another deep dive.
Another day, yeah.
Well, we've covered so much today. It's amazing how much Bitcoin mining is affecting everything.
I know, it's everywhere.
It's connected to politics, energy, even AI.
And to think, people used to think it was just this niche thing for tech people.
Yeah, but it's clearly becoming a bigger and bigger part of our lives.
It really shows you that technology doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of the real world.
And it affects the real world.
For sure, and vice versa.
Absolutely. So before we go, we'll leave you with this thought.
Okay.
Can Bitcoin mining, with all its pros and cons, actually be a force for good?
That's the question.
Can it help us transition to a more sustainable energy future while promoting tech innovation? Or will it be held back by politics and the challenges of navigating a rapidly changing world? We've laid it all out for you.
All the information is there.
The different sides, the key insights. Now you decide what you think it all means.